and there's a hot rumor going around about Andrew Cashner of the San Diego Padres, who's 29 years old. Could be a possibility on the Orioles shopping list for an extra pitcher. He was drafted 19th overall by the Chicago Cubs in the 2008 draft, traded by the Cubs to San Diego for first baseman Anthony Rizzo. He signed through the 16 season. 1 year, $7.15 million is owed for him, and he's a free agent at the end of the 16 season. 6 wins, 16 losses, and a 4.34 earned run average. And joining us now from MASNsports.com School of Roch Kubatko. Roch, you've mentioned Andrew Cashner as a possibility. What are your thoughts on how he might fit into the Orioles scheme of things?
Look, I just want to know if Phil Woods saw his shadow. Are we going to be word on that?
He couldn't miss his shadow.
I'll let you run with that. Okay. As far as Cashner goes, I mean, he's a guy that's intrigued the Orioles previously, and there's interest, and he's been discussed. I'm just not sure exactly what the Padres are doing with him. He was clearly available at the winter meetings, and they were really pushing to move him, and yet he's still with them at this point. So there's a little bit of confusion there. He is a pending free agent. He's coming off a really crappy year, 6-16, 4.34 ERA, and 31 starts, and his WHIP went up from 1.127 to 1.440. So I'm wondering just how much you'd have to give up for a guy like that compared to some other guys who may be available. And Dan Duquette has talked about the possibility of making some deals maybe in spring training if they're not able to do anything beforehand. And we're kind of getting to that point now. Our pitchers and catchers, they report on the 18th. So he's a guy that's wrote to kind of keep an eye on as a possibility. Teams always want pitching in return. Teams keep asking about Kevin Gausman, which, of course, is a deal breaker. I'm just thinking you might have a better shot with him and maybe some other guys are going to be available, and I do know the club likes him.
Yeah, Roch, when you look at Cashner, I mean, he did make 31 starts last year, and the previous 2 seasons actually put us some pretty decent numbers. Now, when you look at the ballpark that he plays in and some of the ballparks that he gets to pitch in that division, did he just have a bad year? Is there any health concerns? I'm not necessarily sure there are any. They'd be looking for a rebound year from him, also a rebound year from Gonzalez, also a rebound year from Tillman, and then hopefully getting something a little bit better than what Ubaldo has given them. I mean, really, is that somewhere they want to go for $7 million plus? Have to give up a player or two to get him.
Exactly. I mean, that would be the gamble there. And again, as a pending free agent as well, so I don't know how much you'd be willing to give up for somebody like that. Maybe they just want to lead the league in rebounding. I don't know, because he would be kind of a rebound guy. But he has had success in the past, and as far as I know, he's healthy. He did make those 31 starts. I just think that when you start kicking names around of guys who could fill that hole for Wei-Yin Chen, that's a guy to consider, because who's left on the free agent market that you really would like at this point? Matt Latos is still out there. He's definitely one of those bounce-back type guys. But if you're looking at recent success, I mean, who do you like better, Cashner or him? So either way, it looks like right now you'd be kind of looking at somebody 1 year kind of bounce back. That's kind of what you're left with at this point.
Roch, if they don't go to the free agent market, if they don't trade, what's the state of the back end of the rotation for the Orioles?
Yeah, anytime I have to do a projection, and it's still early to do that on the rotation, I keep just inserting Worley in there, Vance Worley, because he's on the roster and he's a guy who has started and he's out of options. He's getting paid $2.6 million, so he would make sense compared to some other guys. I know, Mike Wright, Tyler Wilson, pitching prospects like that would be in the mix. But those are guys that you could option and then bring them up later. So at this point, I just kind of put Worley in there, figure for the sake of argument, because I would think he would be the favorite among the in-house guys coming in. And then, of course, you're going to end up with, a pretty nice rotation at Norfolk if you do go that route. And again, I still think they're going to add somebody else. But let's say it is Worley. Then you've got, you got Chris Jones and Chris Lee and Terry Doyle who had a really big year competing for, obviously, to have spots in AAA with Wright, with Wilson. You still got Bridwell, Gunkel, I mean, guys like that might end up getting pushed back to Bowie. So at least they would have some depth there if you were starting both Wilson and Wright at AAA. There are far worse things than having those guys beaten down the door and then be able to bring them up later. That's why, again, at this point, I would still go with Worley. But I know they're going to end up having to add somebody at some point, and I also understand the concern of fans who say, wait, I thought the top priority was to upgrade the rotation. You remove Wei-Yin Chen. Inserting a Vance Worley on paper doesn't look like an upgrade.
All right, Roch, you just outlined all those in-house options. We've been talking about all the potential free agents out there for weeks now, and at this point, I don't know that any of them, looks all that viable. So the fact that they are at least showing some interest in Cashner, does that suggest to you that maybe a trade route is actually maybe the preferred route, and could there be somebody else out there that might fit the bill at the right price for them in that regard?
Yeah, I think, by the way, I just feel like Groundhog Day, because it seems like this topic of pitching has been coming up day after day, but really there's nothing else at this point, and that was supposed to be the number one priority. And it's not from a lack of effort. I mean, they had interest in various guys on the market, but then you saw the prices, and there were concerns with, Fister. They really liked him, a one-year deal, but definitely concerns about his health, and he did pass Houston's physical, but I think the GM was quoted as saying that there were some things they're not quite sure about. They think he'll be fine, which isn't a ringing endorsement. So I could see why the Orioles weren't willing to make a big commitment to him. So I still think maybe trade is the way to go, unless Lato's the guy they end up signing. But they remember originally they were hoping to add multiple starters. They wanted a guy they could definitely plug in the rotation, assuming that Chen was going to leave. And then they wanted somebody else who's kind of a depth move, one of those one-year bounce-back guys. And Cliff Lee was a guy we speculated on. They didn't get the sense he was even really interested in coming back at pitching, so they've been ignoring him. I still think, though, that, it might be easier to go ahead and make a trade. And you keep looking back at the Padres, thinking, well, maybe they're still willing to maybe even move a Tyson Ross, who was on the team control for, I believe, 2 more years, and it's going to end up costing you more, though. But there's always been talk that the Padres might be willing to move one of their starters. So I would seem to double back to them, and I'm sure the Orioles have been kind of keeping an eye out. But it's just tough right now because, like I said, teams always want pitching in return, and then what young pitchers can the Orioles, are they comfortable giving up after they've lost so many guys over the last few years here with, Rodriguez and Hader and some other guys like that, and now Tim Berry on the waiver claim. So, they're a little hesitant to part with those young guys. And, again, Kevin Gausman is not on the table. It'll make absolutely no sense to trade him anyway. We've already got one hole in the rotation.
Roch, we know that Adam Jones is the center fielder. We also know that Kim is projected in left. Now, what about right field? What are you hearing about possible acquisitions for right field?
Let's see, that's the other spot now besides starting pitchers. What about the outfield? And, right now, it looks like, we just keep kicking around in-house candidates like a Reimold. I don't know if Alvarez is really in play or Urrutia. If the season started today, I'd kind of be inclined to think that maybe they would go Reimold. But then we've also kicked around the idea, and I don't think it's completely out of the question. I think the Orioles still prefer to have Chris Davis at first base, but you could always go ahead and play him some in right field, and then that would open up first base for Trumbo, and then you could rotate to DH or whatever. But right now it just seems like more in-house candidates. There's a couple guys on the market, maybe one-year deal type guys like Murphy or somebody like that. But again, these aren't real big names out there. And I think right now they're really focused more on trying to get a starting pitcher. And I would think maybe we just at this point go into camp with what you have. And then again, there's always a possibility you could work something out once you actually get to Sarasota. They're still looking. I know they'd like to add another bat, but it's been easier said than done at this point. Those are the two kind of glaring weaknesses right now, or at least openings that we're still waiting on, is rotation and right field.
Yeah, Roch, when you look at that, I mean, there are two glaring spots that you go, boy, they've got to do something here. And when you look at what the club has done by retaining some of the free agents that were going to be free agents, and they brought them back, Davis, O'Day, keeping Wieters, they're going to spend a lot of money. Their payroll is going to go up quite a bit. They've got a pretty good nucleus. Can you imagine that they're actually just going to go into spring training with what they have and say, oh, well, we'll see, knowing that they kind of really aren't where they want to be going into spring training?
Yeah, they may not have a choice. I mean, I know they're certainly, prepared to do that if they have to. And then again, you can make moves once you've already reported, and they've been known to do that. They've been known to sign guys late, have guys drop in their laps, whatever. So that is a possibility. I think the lineup is going to score enough runs, and I still think it's the rotation that you really have to focus on. Sure, they'd like to add another outfielder, but with you bringing back Davis and Wieters and adding Trumbo, and if Kim turns out to be the guy they think he's going to be, plus the return of Jones and Machado and Scope, and they think that J.J. Hardy, being healthy, is going to go ahead and be more productive than he has been, I don't think there's, whoever you're going to plug in right field may end up being the bottom of the lineup anyway. So I don't think that's as big a concern, again, as the rotation. They're still looking at another BAP. I think that really the focus is, all right, we've got to figure out what we're going to do here with the pitching. And, again, they can go ahead and do something later, but in the meantime, they're already you're hearing a lot more quotes now about how impressed they are with the in-house guys, and you were hearing previously almost as if it's like, okay, just in case we're unable to do this, let's remind everybody we've got some guys that we think might be able to fill in.
Well, Roch, as always, we enjoyed the conversation, the information. Don't forget to check out Roch on MASNsports.com. He always has something out early in the morning, so when you wake up, you might want to check out MASNsports.com. In fact, it's almost like having your own little newspaper inside of your tablet there with Roch's reporting. Roch, we appreciate it.
And if I haven't filed anything early, then send help, because something might be wrong with it.
We'll see you
It
Saturday.
never puts you back to sleep.
We'll see you Saturday, wall-to-wall baseball at 11 here on MASN. But, Dave, when you look at the pitching options of it, we've heard the name of Matt Latos. He's out there, obviously. He's 28 years old. But another pitcher along the way that could be of interest might be Alfredo Simon, who used to pitch for the Orioles. He might be named Simon now, but the last name's varied by pronunciation. But anyway, he won 13 games last year for the Tigers.
He won 13 games. His earned run average was 5. But he was injured last year, and I think it was a hamstring, some type of leg injury, which over the course of 4 or 5 months, during the offseason, that should heal. He was very good for the Cincinnati Reds in a ballpark that's not easy to pitch in. We're talking about he put up ERAs in the mid 2s, upper 2s, and then again 3.4 in his third year there. That's pretty good stuff. And this is a guy that, well, looking back, I'm sure the Orioles said, boy, that would have been a nice piece to have in our rotation over the last 3 or 4 years, some stability there. But of course, they let him go thinking that a guy like Arrieta and Britton at the time and all those guys were going to step up and be starters. Didn't work out here, and Simone went on to have a lot of success. So, is he over the injury? And is he a guy that could bounce back from a poor season? Yeah, and I don't know what he's looking for. We haven't heard his name a lot out there, but he's a piece that the Orioles are familiar with, if nothing else, and he has had a lot of success, albeit for the most part, most of the success was in the National League, but I'll just reiterate. My understanding is that's a really tough ballpark to pitch in, and he did it really well.
A couple of numbers on Alfredo Simon. He'll be 35 on May the 8th, and 12 through 14 with the Reds. 3 seasons, 24 wins, 16 losses, a 3.16 earned run average. A couple of complete games, a shutout last year, 31 starts. But as Dave mentioned, that earned run average at better than 5. But he was the leading winner on the Detroit staff at 13 and 12. So it's not like, as Dave mentioned, that he's a stranger. To the Orioles, he was a relief pitcher one year with 17 saves, and the next year he was a starter.
He's Mr. Rubber Arm. You'd have some of those guys around the big leagues. He can start, and then he can relieve. He can throw 5 days in a row out of the bullpen and then take a couple days off and start. So he's valuable. The guy, I think that, unless there's some kind of injury, something we don't know about, I like Matt Latos. I know he had a miserable year going from Cincinnati to Miami last year and then to the 2 LA teams, but he was injured. And if you look at his first 5 years in the big leagues, his ERAs were among the best among all kinds of pitchers. This guy can really dominate. 270, 313, 335. Excellent ERAs. You can't just write off Matt Latos because he had 1 bad year in 6. You just can't. So I still think Matt Latos is a good deal. And as far as Cashner goes, I think that's a pipe dream for the Orioles because Cashner is the top of the rotation guy potentially. Padres have only 4 starters, and after that, their rotation is thin, their system is thin. They need at least a couple of pitchers that are controllable. They have a first baseman, Will Myers, so Mancini and Walker are out of the picture there as far as San Diego goes. I think the best option is somebody like Matt Latos.
And Mark, when you look back to Latos for a second, when you hear his reputation, I mean, he's got somewhat of a backdoor bad clubhouse guy. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I mean, you see stuff printed about it.
Yeah, you certainly heard it, and the kind of guy that seems like when things haven't gone well for him, that's maybe when this stuff crops up. But I agree with Mel. I think if you're looking at that list of who's left there as free agents, he'd be the one I think I would take a shot at because he's still young enough. He's trying to prove himself again to now maybe get a big contract after having a big bounce-back season. Most of these other guys, you're talking about guys at the tail end of their career that are trying to hang on, and maybe they still have something left. You just don't know. Latos, like you said, only a year or 2 away from being a number 2 starter, let's call it, in the big leagues. So if you have an opportunity to get a guy like that at a low price, yeah, there is always going to be risk involved, given what he went through last year and given if there is a clubhouse issue. But if you feel like you have to go outside the organization to get another starter and you're going to go with that list of whoever's left free agent-wise, I think he'd be the least risk or the one worth taking a shot at out of all those guys left.
And you talk about guys who's on that list. Kyle Lohse is 37 years old. He had 2 good months with the Brewers last year, and then he fell off the map. Is he too old, or can he make a comeback? He can be a good pitcher at times. Cliff Lee has been hurt and hasn't pitched for a while, but if there's anybody that is more determined to get back into winning ways than Cliff Lee, please find him for me. Cliff Lee, too, would be a very good gamble. And Tim Lincecum has morphed now into a bullpen pitcher. The Orioles need starters. Their bullpen is A+ the way it is. They got plenty of depth. They don't need Tim Lincecum. Tim Lincecum had 76 walks, or 60 strikeouts and 38 walks last year in 76 innings. So, you know, the Tim Lincecum that's a Cy Young winner, I think that's long gone. I think Tim Lincecum is a bullpen pitcher at best. I still think he's going to end up with the Giants. The Giants are telling him, hey, go look around and see what other kind of deals there, but we're not going to leave you hanging. You can come back here for everything that you've done. But I don't think Lincecum's an option for the Orioles.
Now, one player that's on that list that we haven't mentioned is Giovanni Gallardo. And obviously he's tied to a draft choice if signed. And, Dave, that could be a hang-up with the Orioles.
Well, it's a hang-up and the amount of money that he's going to, and the amount of years. I mean, it's just that whole thing, to me, puts Gallardo, you know, out of the, you know, situation. I mean, I just don't see that happening. Now,
what if his price drops?
Well, and the fact is that we talked about going into this offseason where the Orioles were looking to bring in more of a top of the rotation guy. I don't want to say number one, but more of somebody that they can really count on more, and, you know, to add to the list of pitchers that they have, and then the possibilities that will be in Norfolk. So maybe they look at Gallardo and go, we're not looking at him as bringing him in as the fifth starter. We're looking at bringing in Gallardo, a long-term guy. Again, if his price drops, like Mel says, that when you go, oh, wait a minute, we're placing this guy up in number 1 or 2, and we're expecting him to be a stable force in that rotation. You know, if the price drops, maybe they don't want he wasn't want as many years. You can only take what somebody's offering you, and it doesn't look like anybody's offering him what he wants right now. So maybe he kind of falls back into the Orioles' plans.
The other thing that's a little scary about Gallardo is that he's pitched 7 straight years with somewhere around 200 innings, and we can remember just recently Bronson Arroyo in the same situation, signing a contract and then needing Tommy John surgery 2 months into it. So you got to watch that thing when a pitcher's extended for a lot of consecutive seasons with a lot of innings, especially when you're, you know, in that 30 to 31 age bracket. Just a reminder, MASN is your headquarters and your box seat to the birds for Orioles spring training games beginning Tuesday, March the 8th. The Orioles and the Red Sox at 1 with a replay at 7 o'clock in the evening. Thursday, March the 10th against the Yankees, same format, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, replay at 8. Then Wednesday, March the 16th against the Pirates at 1, replay at 7. Sunday the 20th against the Rays, 1 o'clock, 7 replay. Friday the 25th against the Yankees. And then Tuesday, March the 29th against the Atlanta Braves. And Wednesday, March the 30th against the Detroit Tigers, starting at 6.